Hey, good afternoon, folks. It's Wednesday, it's hump day. So, I want to talk about my garden today a little bit, partly because I went out to do some stuff earlier and it was just too dang bitter for me to be out. Even with the sun and the fact that it's 55 degrees, the wind is blowing so nasty that I just couldn't be out for all that long. And so I stayed out as long as I could, but I didn't get anything done garden wise. So I'm going to talk about it instead because you know what they say, those who can do, those who can't do blogs. Um, so some of my garden plans changed a bit because of the seeds that I got from the library. And some of them will change as I go forward simply because you don't always get everything that you want when you're planting your garden. I mean, it's fine even in a normal year. Sometimes getting what seeds you want is challenging. This year, I suspect it's going to be a lot worse. So, I'm preparing for being unprepared. And everybody should do that because sometimes, you plant 8 billion starts and you carefully grow them on your windowsill and they're looking perfect and you put them out the first night and it's supposed to be 55 degrees out and for whatever reason the gods just suddenly make it below freezing and everything dies. You have to deal with it. This is what gardening and farming is about. Problems happen and you just deal. So, the first things that I want to have go into my garden are actually probably leeks, radishes, and beets, and maybe arugula. Those are all things that are cold weather hardy. Oh, and the kale. Kale is a really hardy. We had kale planted when we had our farm, and we didn't harvest it all by the end of November, and we had heavy winter storms early. So it was like January, and I was craving fresh greens, and I went and I dug through 2 feet of snow and pulled out kale. It was perfectly edible. Kale is not really daunted by cold weather. So, and for a green, it's chock full of deliciousness. It's got vitamin C, it's got iron, it's got niacin, and it's got, I think it has available protein, although don't quote me on that. I'd have to look it up. But my original plans for my garden looked something like this. So the four sort of long, skinny beds that you see on the left hand side of the screen there are 3 foot by 10 foot beds. The big round ones are tractor tires and they are almost 10 feet across. And the smaller circles are regular sized like car tires. And the right hand side rectangle that's horizontal is a smaller bed that isn't really a bed, it's just where our blueberries are. So those long, skinny beds, the 3x10s, are where I'm going to end up putting most of my things that that are going early, with the exception of things like the beets. So the kale and leeks will probably go in that first long skinny bed that you see on the left because they're going to go in now or relatively close to now. The kale will probably go in right away. I might plant it this week. I might plant it next week. It will be fine at this time of year. So if you want to start growing something now, if you just have to grow something, kale is a good choice. So are radishes, by the way. You can do leeks. Either you can buy them as starts, so they're like little, they almost look like little green onions, or you can do them from seed. And I like to kind of do a mix because the ones that you get as starts are going to be ready in July or August, and the ones that you start as seeds are going to be available in October and November, December, January timeframe. So you kind of get a longer season. Now you can pick leeks early when they're green onion size, and that's perfectly fine, but it just seems kind of a waste because if you wanted green onions, you could just grow green onions. So, that first bed, like I said, I think is going to be the leeks and the kale, and then I'll have the cucumbers in there as well. They should fit fine because each of those only takes up, like each plant should take up less than a square foot, and there's space for 10 plants, 3 across, so I can do 3 rows. But we'll see what happens. The second bed I probably will plant with the radishes and the arugula because I can put those in right away. The radishes can actually be planted sort of everywhere because what happens is when you plant them in, traditionally when you're planting beets and carrots, you mix in radishes with them because the seeds are about the same size. You mix them all together and then you kind of sprinkle them. And when they come up, the radishes grow really fast because they grow to maturity in less than a month. And everything else takes 3 or 4 months. And I mean, it takes a while before they really hit a large enough space that it's problematic. So what happens is that your radishes grow and they actually force space between your seeds. And so they create vegetative social distancing. Hey. And they space them out nicely so they grow nicer. And you get radishes. So, I mean, really, radishes are yummy. And by the way, for any of you who are medieval food fans, medieval people didn't eat a whole lot of fresh, raw vegetables or fruit. They cooked most things for a whole bunch of reasons, but mostly because they thought that they would get bad humors from eating raw stuff. A lot of people did anyway, especially poor people who didn't have the ability to cook fancy stuff, but it was not recommended. It was bad for you. It would make you choleric. So they cooked radishes a lot in the same way that you would cook parsnips or turnips. And they have almost a cross between a radish and a turnip flavor. It takes the spiciness of the radishes and it dulls it down and leaves this kind of nice background overlay, which is pretty good. So I highly recommend cooking radishes because they're delish. And I actually have a couple of recipes for like modern radish curry and medieval radish stew, and then some kind of in the middle, plausibly Middle Eastern medieval but no proof kind of thing. So lots of options there, and they grow so fast. You can grow them in waves. You can throw them down every 2 weeks in whatever beds you're working on. They'll help space out your other seeds, and you get this constant influx of fresh vegetables. And the greens, if you pick them when they're really thin and light, when you're thinning them out, you can just throw them right into your salad. If you have bunnies or any other kind of animals, they will love to eat them, and they make fairly good compost too. Peas require a pea fence, which I actually already put in yesterday when I was playing out in the garden. So I have to go and get the hammer and pound it in, but it's sitting out there ready to go, which is awesome. Turnips could go in now if you wanted to, but they actually do better when you plant them into warmer soil that's like 50 degrees or warmer, and then they'll keep growing until late in the fall, and they get harvested in like either late August through November, early November, depending on how big you want to get them. I'm going to try and grow purple top turnips as opposed to rutabagas, partly because they're easier and partly because I just like them. The flavor is pretty similar in my strong opinion, but I could go either way. Purple top ones are actually period. We have pictures of them in woodcuts, and they talk about them in some manuscripts, so they're perfectly fine. I'm pretty sure rutabagas are period to like everywhere and everywhen. I think they're kind of one of those ubiquitous foods along with leeks. The herbs, if I can get the seeds anytime soon, I will actually start indoors. Herbs are very easy to transfer. So you can take your herb seedlings and then just take them and pop them out. And you can use egg cartons to plant them in, or you can get those little cell things from the Dollar General or whatever. And you put them in, you pop them out when they're, yay high, a couple inches high, and then you can put them outside whenever your seed tells you to. Most herbs can handle cool nights, but don't want it to be like frost levels. So they'll go out in May, but they wouldn't go out yet. So that gives me, a good probably a month before it's time to start planting delicate greens outside. Things like chives and the Egyptian walking onions, as you could tell from yesterday's video, do just fine. Beets can go out now, and beets are interesting because you can use the whole plant. If you plant your beets really thick in your soil, what will happen is they'll come up and it'll be like grass almost, because they come up in these little tiny um, fronds first. You let them get to about 1.5 inches, 2 inches tall, and then start thinning them a little bit, because otherwise they'll smash into each other and you won't get nice beets. But when you pull those greens, don't throw them away. Eat them, put them in a salad, mix them into a soup, put them in a stew, dehydrate them and stick them in your green powder. They're full of antioxidants and they taste good and they're good for you. And they're a great way to get some early greens in you, especially this time of year. I think those of us in New England who aren't getting a lot of sun over the winter, we really want that extra batch of vitamins this time of year. We're craving it. We really want it. Things like, let me see, the tomatoes and the cucumbers and the carrots have to wait until the soil is above 55 degrees. Now, I'll tell you the traditional method for determining when those things go in. The traditional method is to take your breeks off and sit down in the dirt. If your butt is not cold after sitting there for a minute, then it's warm enough to plant your corn, your cucumbers, your carrots, and your other sensitive things. However, that assumes that you had a large field and that your neighbors were used to you pulling your breeks off and sitting in the field. I have a funny feeling that my neighbors might complain a little bit about seeing me sit in the little tires. I think it would look a little odd. So I will probably go by touch. I highly recommend the touch method. Get in touch with your dirt. There's actually antidepressants, natural antidepressants in soil. It's something that worms put off when they're transforming stuff into soil. And it's good for us. It helps elevate our mood in a very natural way. It helps up our serotonin. Along with the vitamin D we're getting from being out in the sun is all just a really good thing. Tomatoes have to wait until it's really warm before you put them out, so don't even bother thinking about them right now. They can, however, be started indoors. If you're going to be growing tomatoes this year and you're starting them indoors, I highly recommend picking up a cheap fan. Yes, a fan. You want to have air blowing over your tomato seedlings. Once they get to be about the length of your baby finger, if you don't blow wind over them, they get what we call leggy. They get really tall and they fall over and they're not hardy. If, on the other hand, you have wind blowing over them for either all the time at a very light level or a couple of times a day at least, or variable fan if you've got one, then they beef up and they make stronger stalks, which is what they do when they're outside. They only get that spindly stuff when they're inside, where they don't have to compete against anything. So give them a little bit of hardiness. They're just like kids. If you treat them badly, they'll get stronger. I did not say that. Don't treat them badly. But let them use their muscles, okay? There, that's a better analogy. Anyway, I contacted Agway in Peterborough today about my seeds, and I'm going to be contacting them by phone to get some prices and availability. And then I'm also going to go and look into some of the mail order seed places. It's been a while since I've ordered seeds online. It's very convenient, but it's sometimes a little more expensive. Agway, you'll get slightly less good quality seeds sometimes, but you have more options and you'll get starts as well as seeds, which can sometimes just be really nice. It's nice to stick the pre-planted, pre-sprouted seeds in the soil sometimes because they're more likely to survive. And that's kind of a relief if you're new to gardening. It's really hard when you spend hours planting seeds and then you keep coming out every day and you finally see the first green tops and then the next morning you go out and something's eaten them all. By the way, that's probably why people took up hunting. Anyway, I'm off for the day. I hope you guys have a great afternoon and look for me tomorrow. I will probably be on. We'll see what happens. I think that's everything. I'm going to leave you with a little view of my garden there again. So as the weeks show up, I'm going to fill those in, and you'll be able to see what they look like and see what everything is that's and where it's planted. All right, you guys have a great weekend. Enjoy Hump Day. Hope you make it through. Friday is only a couple of days away. Bye for now.